Go ahead.
I'm Mrs. Gilliam, and I'll be reading Chapter 7, In a Spin. Holly is making a special present for the whole class, and she has two strange goldfish named Billy and Lily, and they live in a tank with a castle. I told Og when I was back in room 26 on Monday. Boing, my friend twanged. Then the bell rang and class began, so I didn't have time to tell him more. As usual, Mrs. Brisbane started the day with math. Then we had a spelling test. I would have gotten 100%, except for the word flurry. I think I had a piece of bedding stuck in my ear because I thought Mrs. Brisbane said furry. Still, it was my best spelling test of the year. When it was time for recess, Mrs. Brisbane said it was terribly cold outside, so my friends got to stay inside and decorate the room. They made paper snowflakes, yummy-looking candy canes, and all kinds of funny gingerbread people. Then everyone gathered in a circle to answer a homework question. What do you like best about the winter holidays? Thomas was first to shout out, "No school!" All the rest of my friends shouted, "Yes!" I didn't join in because school is my home. It's my favorite place. Unlike my classmates, I also didn't have any idea of where Og and I would be spending the holidays. Next, Mrs. Brisbane called on tall Paul Green. "Presents," he answered. "I get a present every night during Chanukah." A lot of my friends answered, "Ooh." "We light the menorah and add another candle every night for 8 nights, he added. "I like presents too," Daniel said. "Santa leaves them under our tree." "I like making presents for other people," helpful Holly said. I certainly knew that was true. "And I help my grandma make cookies when we go to the farm," Holly continued. "I love to help my grandma. I'm making a special present for her." Mrs. Brisbane smiled. "I guess we all like presents." Rolling Rosie raised her hand next. "I like tamales," she said. "My mom and my grandmother, I call her Mi Abuela, and my aunt, Tia Louisa, make 100 tamales or more, and I help." "I love tamales. Tell us more about how you make them," Mrs. Brisbane said. Rosie nodded. "We put all kinds of yummy things in the masa. That's made from corn. Then they roll them up in corn husks and tie them so they can cook. Our whole house smells like tamales. The whole street smells like tamales." Just thinking of yummy things wrapped in corn had my whiskers wiggling. I'd love to stay at Rosie's house over the winter break. "Yum, I can almost taste them," Mrs. Brisbane said. Sophie's hand was waving wildly, so Mrs. Brisbane called on her next. I get to set up the nativity scene that goes under our tree. The people and the carved animals are tiny, so I have to be careful not to break anything, especially the baby in the manger. "See, here's one of the wise men." Sophie pulled out a small carved figure of a man in robes riding a camel. "Oh, and I love the presents and cookies and carol singing and stockings," she said. "Oh, did I mention the cookies? And the tree? It all sounded great, great, great. I would love to see that nativity scene sometime." Stop Talking Sophie probably could have gone on for quite a while. Mrs. Brisbane said it was Kelsey's turn to talk. "My mom and dad took me to see the Nutcracker last week," she said. "That's a ballet, and I love ballet." She held up the program with a picture of a little girl dancing on her toes in front of a beautiful Christmas tree. Mrs. Brisbane asked her to share part of the story with us. "There's a little girl named Clara, and the dancer was actually a little girl," Kelsey explained. "At midnight on Christmas Eve, all the toys come alive, and then mice come in and they get in a big fight. And then there's dancing candy from all around the world, and oh, it's hard to explain, but someday I hope I can dance in the Nutcracker." She explained it well enough for me to wish I could see the Nutcracker too. "We celebrate Christmas in Kwanzaa," forgetful Phoebe said. "Kwanzaa starts on December 26th. Last year, Mom and Dad and I lit 7 candles, each one representing something important, and we ate fruit and had lots of fun. I like fruit, so I think I'd like Kwanzaa too. But this year, I'll just be talking to them on the phone," she added. "That's the only present I want." Phoebe lives with her grandmother while her parents are far away in the military. I really, really, really hope she gets that call. "Of course, Phoebe. The holidays are all about family," Mrs. Brisbane said. "That's what I like," Harry Ito said. "Everyone comes to our house. I have 6 cousins. First we play board games, then we play ping pong and end up chasing each other all over the house. I've seen Harry play ping pong, but I'd like to see him with his cousins, all 6 of them." Slow Down Simon raised his hand. "I like Chanukah, the way Paul G does. I like the 8 days of presents. I like lighting the menorah, but my favorite part is spinning the dreidel." It sounds as if he said dray-dull. Who would like something dull? Simon reached in his pocket and pulled out a small wooden top. So that was a dreidel. I'd heard about it last year when Simon's big sister Gail took me to their house for Chanukah. but I'd been too far away to see what it looked like. He put it on the table in front of it and made it spin. I dashed up to the tippy top of my cage to get a better look. The dreidel had markings on each of the 4 sides. Those are letters from the Hebrew alphabet, Simon said. He explained that you spin the dreidel, and depending on what side it lands on when it stops, you either get money or give up money. But it's not real money, he told us. It's made of chocolate. I think chocolate money would taste a lot better than real human money. Simon let his friends try spinning the dreidel, and he even taught them a little song. Dreidel, 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 everyone sang. I squeaked along. I was hoping that maybe I'd get to go home with Simon for Chanukah again. I like to go caroling, tell the truth, Thomas said next. We go door to door around the neighborhood, singing the songs. Then everyone comes to our house and we drink hot chocolate. My mom makes the best hot chocolate. This time, I didn't think Thomas was exaggerating at all. Small Paul finally spoke up. He said he liked adding things to his elaborate train set to make it look like the holidays. I put a pine tree in the middle and decorated it, he said. And I put candy canes in all the cars. I even put Santa's sleigh with his reindeer on the roof of one of the houses. If you want to see it, come on over, he said. Just call first. It sounded wonderful, but I'd had an unspeakably scary experience on that train, so I didn't mind skipping that one. Mrs. Brisbane looked at the clock. It was almost lunchtime. Then she noticed just Joey. He was looking down at his feet again. How about you, Joey, she said. There must be something you like about the holidays. Joey looked up. One year, my dad and I made a regular snowman. Then we made a second snowman, but that one was standing on his head. That was hard to do, but it was fun. I guess you're hoping it snows this Christmas, Mrs. Brisbane said. Not really, Joey answered. Even if it snows, Dad might not get here this year. Oh dear, Mrs. Brisbane said. My tail twitched and my whiskers wiggled. I was sorry to hear that. I'm sorry, Joey. My mom and Dad won't be able to come to the Winter Wonderland show either, Phoebe said. But my grandmother will be here. Well, my mom will be here, Joey said. I was glad to hear some good news. I crossed all my toes, wishing that Joey's dad would get home for the holidays. I hoped Phoebe would be back with her family soon, and I wished with all my heart that it would snow. For Joey. As I said, I don't particularly like the snow. Mrs. Brisbane stood up, but then Holly said, What do you like about the holidays, Mrs. Brisbane? I think our teacher was surprised at first. She hadn't expected to be included. Thank you for asking, Holly, she said. I was a little sad because our son Jason and his new wife lived too far away to get home this Christmas. But I just found out that my sister is coming to visit, and she's bringing my niece and her husband and their 2 young children. So I'll also have my great-niece Jenny and great-nephew Todd for the holidays. I'm looking forward to having a big family celebration. Early that evening, when Og and I were alone, I looked out of my cage and noticed something sitting nearby. It was dark outside, but the streetlight lit up our table. Look, Og, it's Simon's dreidel, I squeaked. He must have left it here. Og splashed noisily in his tank. I thought about how Simon had spun the dreidel. Spinning is something I like a lot. I spin on my wheel to pass the time. It makes me strong, strong, strong. And when I'm rolling across the floor in my hamster ball, it sometimes goes into a spin that makes my tummy do a funny flip-flop. I don't think he'd mind if I gave it a spin. Do you? Asked my neighbor. Boing! Og agreed. So I opened the lock that doesn't lock and hurried over to the top. It was about the same size as I was, and I saw that the sides were flat. I got up on my tippy toes and stood the dreidel up on its spinner. Here it goes, I said, and I gave the top a spin. But oops, I hung on a little too long. When I finally let go, I was feeling a little dizzy, and I tipped over. The dreidel tipped over too, and landed right on me. Boing, 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 Og twanged. Don't worry, I'm fine, I said. I'm not the kind of hamster who gives up easily. So I stood the dreidel up again and gave it a spin. This time, I quickly let go and scrambled out of the way. It whirled and twirled all around me. In order for me to keep my eyes on it, I had to spin around too. Dreidel, 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 I squeaked, the way Simon had taught us. The dreidel slowed, wobbled, then toppled over. I was about to see what side it landed on when I heard that rattle, rattle, rattle coming down the hall. Eek, it's Aldo. I scrambled back to my cage and pulled the door behind me. I like Aldo, but I don't want him to find me outside of my cage. A hamster has to have some secrets. Greetings, my friends, he said as he turned on the lights. He pulled his cart into the room and then came over to our table. How's my favorite hamster and favorite frog tonight? Fine, 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 I answered. Og hopped up and down. Boing, boing. What's this? Aldo asked as he picked up the dreidel. Oh, I know. Dreidel, 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 he sang with a smile. I'd better put this in a safe spot. He took the dreidel to Mrs. Brisbane's desk, which is a very safe spot. But before he went to work, he gave the dreidel a good spin. It was just a good spin. It spun right off the desk and landed on the floor. I was glad that it hadn't spun onto the floor when I was hanging onto it. Otto chuckled and put the dreidel back on the desk. Later, after Otto was gone, I looked over at the dreidel. I love spinning, but I decided to leave it alone for the rest of the night. On quiet nights in room 26, I have a lot of time to think. That night, I thought about what all my friends had shared earlier that day. I thought Mrs. Brisbane was right when she said the holidays were all about family. But then I had a truly terrible thought. I jiggled the lock that doesn't lock on my cage and hurried over to Og's take. Og, I squeaked, remember all of those things they said in class about families? Boing, boing, he replied. But what about us, I asked. I don't have a family. I mean, I used to, but I hardly remember them. I must admit, I do remember the wonderful smell of my mom, and I remember quite a few tiny brothers and sisters. But that's about it. Boing, 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 Og twanged in his weird way. Oh no, I said. It just slipped out. But I suddenly remembered a lesson on frogs we had long ago, when Og first came to room 26. As it turns out, frogs are amphibians. They come out of eggs. So Og probably didn't remember his mom at all. I wondered if he remembered his egg. Not only that, frogs come out as little tadpoles. They aren't even frogs yet. I wondered if he remembered being a tadpole. I stared through the glass at my neighbor, with his green skin, his huge mouth, and his googly eyes. Boing, he repeated. I know, Og, I said. It's okay. I'm sure we'll spend the holiday, well, I don't know where, but with some family. He began to splash around in his water. Besides, I squeaked softly, I kind of think that maybe, well, you and I are like family, because we live together and we share what goes on here. What do you think? Og splashed and splashed and splashed some more. His splashing made me feel a lot better. It turns out that having a frog in the family is a great, great, great idea. Humphrey's Winter Wonderings. I wonder if my family ever wonders what happened to me, because sometimes I wonder what happened to them.